Okay, now we're going to go over control theories, including social bonding and low self-control theory or general theory of crime. Two different names for it. Control theories set themselves apart because they ask a different question. They ask, why do people conform? With their answer is, well, there's certain controls in society that make them conform. Other theories basically look, why would people violate the law by nature, and what keeps us from doing that? So really at the beginning, an undercurrent here is the control theorists more follow like a philosophical Hobbesian belief that everybody, if they aren't constrained, would commit crimes. Whereas the other theories, I would say, take along like a Rousseau look that if things are going good and everything's provided, then most people would not resort to crime. Agnew in 93 pointed out one of the problems with control theories is it assumes that everybody's going to be motivated to commit crime kind of the same way. And ultimately, if we didn't have the controls, would everybody commit crime? Would they be motivated the same way? And really, the answer comes up no. One of the reasons that control theories probably think this way is they align themselves more with classical thinking that people are all rational beings. And again, one of the problems with talking about rationality is it assumes we are all on the same plane. So some of the early control theorists were Rice, where he divided controls into personal or internal controls versus external controls. So personal controls were, that you were able to not want to steal. I mean, that could be from, how you were raised, where external controls would be informal sanctions such as your parents being disappointed, or formal sanctions such as legal. Now, Nye and Reckless were working on their theories about the same time, even though that they have different dates. Nye divided it into three different areas: direct control, where that's that punishment reward system provided by parents to make you conform to the values and belief system of the society. Indirect control is really kind of like secondary direct control that one of the reasons you might comply is because you don't want to disappoint your parents. And finally, internal control would be what is within the person that provides that sense of guilt that they wouldn't want to do it. So that really was just expanding Rice's ideas. Reckless also does the same thing. He just names them different. So we have inner containment is really what was called internal control. And that's where you have a good concept, strong conscience that ultimately probably was guided by, how you grew up. Outer containment is parental and school supervision to make sure that you follow the values and rules of society. And one of the things that outer containment would be is being part of a group that is conventional, pro-social, and that you have a consistent moral front based on the belief system of the society. He then added pushes and pulls, which really talk about like discontent, hostility, aggressiveness, or that they could be environmental, like poverty, deprivation, that help shape these. And pulls were really behaviors that made you want to commit deviancy, like having bad companions, gangs, and subcultures. So these were the early theories. Now, then comes along in 1957, Gresham Sykes and David Matza in their drift theory, where people drift in and out of crime. And so they might be pro-social on some things and then they're pro-criminal on others. And so if you basically go back and forth, how do you then justify when you do things that are wrong? And so they came up with these justifications, One, deny responsibility, deny injury, deny the victim, condemn the condemners, and appeal to higher authorities. And we do this in our daily lives when we do something that maybe is a little underhanded, we'll come up with reasons. And then this chart really kind of gives an idea of what somebody would say. I like the deny injury because I always heard this from like burglars. The reason that it wasn't such a big deal is because the businesses have insurance, never accounting like fear or how hard they worked to get where they were, or even if they have insurance, then their insurance rates are going to go up. It was just an excuse to justify why they committed burglary. We can look at appeal to higher loyalties. A lot of times this is, you hear this in lower class, like snitches get stitches. So you don't want to tell. You want to protect your gang members or your buddies. And so you appeal to something else as the reason of why you did the crime. And condemn the condemners is another thing that's famous in prison because I always heard that, I didn't do it, the police set me up. Until then, they pled guilty and then they would say, well, I did it, but the police still set me up. Deny victim, we hear a lot of times with rape cases, look how she was dressed, she wanted me. And then deny responsibility, most of them do. Ultimately, like they were forced into criminality. So those are some kind of excuses of how somebody could ultimately create in their mind why it's okay to do deviant behavior. And as I said in the video under social learning, this could apply as well to social learning theory. Control theories then went along kind of under the radar until really 1965 when Travis Hershey writes a book on crime and delinquency, and it becomes known as social bonding theory, and basically saying if people don't have pro-social bonds, they'll commit crime. When this theory first came out, it was so unique, it got a lot of attention. And one of the things that Hershey did is he not only laid out his theory, but he tested it. And the mechanisms that are needed not to commit deviant acts, according to this theory, were attachment to others, commitment, involvement, and belief. And all of these revolve around pro-social, conventional values, norms, and beliefs. So here was just a little table that I tried to make, not very good. But so we attach to family, friends, the community in a pro-social way. Commitment is to your future and career and success, personal goals. It really is saying, okay, I commit to doing the right thing so I can then have good things in the future. Involvement is getting in pro-social activities, whether they be school activities, sports teams, community organizations such as the Boys or the Girls Club, Boys or Girl Scouts, participating in religious groups like youth group, or social clubs that could be within the community, for like example, like DMLA or Rainbow Girls. Most of you don't even know what those are. Or participating in 4-H would be another example. And then the belief system is like that you follow what the values are of society. And I kind of chuckled to myself on this honesty one because people are told to be honest, but then we see through the media, particularly politicians, constantly lying to us. So you be honest there. We certainly want criminal justice personnel to be honest. Morality, fairness, law, legal, and then taking responsibility for your behavior. One thing that is unique about Hershey, and I think it goes back to that kind of that classical thought process, is he didn't add in religion. And one would think that based on literature, particularly today, shows that people that have a religious base are more bound to participate in conventional or pro-social behaviors. One, I think, because it gives you a foundation of what morality and honesty and a value system is. So ultimately, some of the things that have been used to test social bonding have looked at communication with parents, in other words, attachment, academic achievement, and what your educational goals are, belief in laws. Some of the other things they might look at is what activities you participate in. Empirical validity, social bonding is weak to moderate. Part of the problem is what are the researchers testing? And ultimately, this then becomes part of biosocial because we know how important bonding is, and that bonding really ultimately becomes part of good parenting. Empirical validity, so it's a good theory. And here is what I said. He didn't think that religion was related, which ultimately religion is a belief system, so it contradicts his own theory. Then a few years later, Hershey jumps off the boat of bonding theory and jumps into self-control theory with Gottfredson. And Gottfredson was a psychologist, and together they put together this theory. And one of the things that I've already brought up is they see themselves separate from other positivist theories, which is really positive theories are looking for another cause outside the person that might lead them to deviant behavior. So environment would be a good one, like poverty. They believe that ultimately that positivists assume that everybody will conform to crime, although that they don't admit that their theory assumes everybody will commit crime. They see control theories assuming crime will occur unless prevented. In other words, crime is the basis, and by having these social controls, including punishment, so you can see that that becomes the deterrent effect. Without that deterrent effect, then people will commit crime. Sorry about that. Things pop up on my screen all the time. So in general theory of crime, or it also is called low self-control, all individual differences in the propensity to refrain from or to commit crime are based on self-control. So they've reduced down really that crime is committed because of low self-control. Not to say that that isn't true, but high self-control, you are less likely to engage in deviant behavior, where low self-control, you will participate when there are opportunities available. And the source under general theory of crime of low self-control is really ineffective or incomplete socialization by the parents. And good parents are attached to the children, they supervise them, and then they punish deviant acts. In other words, in some of their writings, they say they socialize children into self-control. So the family is the most important socialization process in the early years and is very important in trying to shape children to have the same value set that your society does. One of the problems, though, is they assume that there's equity among families, and ineffective parenting would not account for why some siblings turn out okay and others don't. So they also see self-control as a trait that is shaped early in life. And one of the things that they say, past behavior predicts future behavior. So if you have early low self-control, you will always have low self-control. So these are some things that Gottfredson and Hershey state in their theory. First of all, crime gives immediate gratification. Crime is easy. You don't really have to put too much effort into it. Some crimes you might, but a lot of times crime is a quick fix for holes. Like you don't have a job, so you need money, so you commit a robbery. The other thing is crime is exciting, it's risky, or it's thrilling. And so that one reason people get into crime is for the risk. Four, there are few or meager long-term benefits that most people that commit crime think short-term. Okay, I'm hungry. I don't have any money, so let's go shoplift steak at the Piggly Wiggly. Crime requires little skill or planning. Now, some crimes require this, but a lot of street crimes, basically all you need is the opportunity. And then one of the things that it causes pain or discomfort for the victim, which the offender is not sensitive to. It's all about themselves. So, Gottfredson and Hershey describe people with low self-control as being self-centered, indifferent, or insensitive. They also state that with low self-control, people want immediate gratification, immediate pleasures, and it might be in other activities like smoking, drinking, drugs, gambling, promiscuity, and having children out of wedlock. Which when you look at some of the testing of this theory, these are the questions that they ask people. The benefit of many crimes is not pleasure, but relief from momentary irritation, minimal tolerance for frustration, and inability to respond to conflict through verbal rather than physical means. This really is kind of a loaded statement. And in some of the other theories that we've already discussed, we've talked about like an irritable child can be easily frustrated, and then that moves through the developmental course. But ultimately, the inability to respond to conflict really means we find that a lot of deviants have low verbal scores, where their frustration leads them to act out rather than think out an answer. And so that they've lumped that in as low self-control. The other thing is, and I don't know why they think this, that they have a higher tolerance of physical pain. Now, they write this theory in 1990, and a lot of the research that comes out, particularly brain research, is not available to them. And I sometimes wonder if this is a biased statement, because a lot of unfounded beliefs are on minorities having more tolerance for physical pain than whites. And it's interesting, they've done studies like in the medical field, where they've held off giving pain medication to minorities, thinking that their pain is not severe as someone that's white, which I don't know if maybe they believe the whites are frail or they're just racist. People who lack self-control will tend to be impulsive, insensitive, physical in how they handle things, risk takers, short-sighted, and nonverbal. So that's what low self-control is. So what I did is, and I've never really liked this theory, because to me, and in Aker's book, he expresses some of my concerns, although I'm assuming that they were his concerns as well, is that really when we're talking about low self-control and how Gottfredson and Hershey define it, they're really talking about antisocial behavior, which really is the behavior that leads to criminal behavior. So I have highlighted in yellow some of the things that, if we were looking at antisocial traits, would match up to what they are saying. The one thing that I didn't put in, well, I put in ADD, ADHD, we find with a lot of antisocial behavior, or with antisocial behavior. But think about like when you have a kid that has difficulty paying attention, and then how that then adds to non-success in school and makes them feel out of the box, etc., if not dealt with or diagnosed appropriately. So the empirical validity of low self-control. Obviously, if you're testing for something that really is measuring antisocial personality, which is one of the factors we find in crime, it really will come out strong. And so this really ends up being what we refer to as a circular theory or a tautological theory. We're really measuring what the factors are of offenders. And we already know those. Gottfredson and Hershey stated low self-control was set by 8 years old. This is invalid because we've learned from the biosocial world that the brain keeps forming and changing until about the age of 25. Even some of the more recent research is expanding it to age 26. And ultimately, to fit into control theories, this theory tries to really match up to classical theories where rational beings with free will, that the only way we can determine is through punishment or discipline. And so it makes the assumption right from the beginning that the child is going to commit crime unless they have strong parents who then prevent the crime. Now, just a question for you to ponder is, are all children bad from birth, or do bad parents influence the behavior that then leads them to bad? So just something to think about. And that is control theory.